Hello, and welcome back to my second episode of Begonia Banter with me, Kristen, from at BegoniaSarawak on Instagram. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for listening. The first episode, I got a lot of positive feedback, so I got a lot of inspiration to keep going, inspiration on new topics. So, for those of you who I was messaging with on topics and ideas for topics, I really appreciated it because you came up with fabulous topics, and I'm excited to record them for you guys and other people who are listening. And in this episode, I wanted to talk about what I like about plants and plant keeping, plant chores in general, and what I don't like about plants, plant chores, and plants in general. We'll start off with the positives. So, what do I like about plants? My number one thing that I like about plants, I think, is propagating. I think propagating plants is extremely fun. I always seem to be looking at my plants and assessing whether I can take a successful propagation or not. It's like a favorite pastime of mine at this point. So, yeah, propagating is probably my favorite part of keeping plants because, one, in general, I prefer small plants. That's one of the main reasons why I like begonias, is because most of them are kind of on the smaller side and they don't have large leaves, and that's my preferred type of plant. And so when you're taking propagations, obviously they're small plants, and I just like looking at these cute little adorable small plants with small leaves. So yeah, that's probably, if I was thinking about it logically, probably why I like propagating plants, is because that's like my favorite way to look at plants, is seeing them when they're really small. So propagating is probably number one. And number two, these are in no order, by the way, but I do think that propagating is number one. But the rest of the ones I'm going to say are in no specific order. But next, I do love pruning. I, for whatever reason, love seeing a crispy leaf or a dead flower and picking it off of the plant. There's something so satisfying about that to me. Like, it's like you're cleaning it up, basically. And I don't know, there's something about removing like a dry, crispy something off of this, vivacious, luscious plant that I really like seeing, like removing the dead, leaf or flower or something like that. So I enjoy pruning. I probably prune my plants, I don't know, a couple times a week. Dead leaves aren't falling every week, but there's a ton of flowers like everywhere in my greenhouse and in my bins. So that's mainly what I'm picking up when I do it a few times a week. It's mainly just the dead blooms. But, obviously, occasionally there'll be a dead leaf or a crispy leaf. So that's pruning. Next, I really like watering. I don't like mixing my fertilizer into my water. I find that extremely tedious and redundant, and I don't like that, even though it only takes literally less than a minute for whatever reason. I do not like freshly mixing my fertilizer before I water. I wish I could just take water and just go, because I like the actual act of watering my plants. So I do have the tendency to be an over-waterer, which is why when I found these little miniature squirt bottles, which are on my Amazon storefront, they severely helped me in not over-watering my plants, because you get the satisfaction of seeing water come out and you feel like you're doing something productive and helpful by giving the plant water, but you're not actually giving a large volume of water. So I love those little miniature squirt bottles, and for someone like me who loves to water, It's very helpful. So yeah, I do love my watering day. I find it very therapeutic. I like seeing the soil go from dry to moist. If I'm thinking about it, I don't think I like seeing water drip out of the bottom, but I like seeing the soil on the top go from dry to moist. And if there are roots on the top, I like seeing them get coated with water. I don't know, it just makes me feel like I'm being Mother Nature or I'm being just helpful in general. So I do like watering my plants. That's probably also high up on my list of favorite things that I like about plants. I also like inspecting the foliage. I do this maybe once a week or once every other week, just kind of for fun. I like taking the leaves and flipping them over and just really inspecting the leaves. And even with my little, not magnifying glass, what's it called? Kind of like a little miniature lens. And I'll put it up to my the camera on my iPhone, and I'll like look through it. So I kind of makeshift a little microscope with my phone and a little lens, and I like looking really close at the leaves. Or like if there's hair on the leaf, I like looking at the hairs, and if there's veins, I like looking at the veins. Like I just like inspecting the foliage up close, and I like touching the leaves. I like getting familiar with the foliage. I think it's very helpful to do that, and I do suggest people do that. You don't have to do it once a week, but just get familiar with how your leaves feel when they're quote unquote healthy, because if you touch them one day and they don't feel the same, then that could help you mitigate a problem, sooner rather than later. Like for instance, if you feel a leaf, and let's say it's usually on the thicker side, like a blanchii, and then one time you touch it again, maybe a few weeks later, whatever, and it's not as thick, you could say, hey, maybe this plant needs water, or maybe, yeah, I'm not watering it as much as I should have. And it just kind of perks your senses up to what could be a problem or what could not be a problem. It just helps you get more, I'd say, in tune with your plants. And yeah, so I like inspecting my foliage and specifically touching them. And as a little side note, this just popped into my head. It's unrelated to the topic at hand, but I get questions all the time, and whether I can, like, how do I know if a plant is a terrarium plant or whether it's not a terrarium plant? And the short answer of it, and obviously this is not a exact science, this is just from my experience, so please, do your own research and whatnot, but if I touch a leaf and it feels thin, I'm not talking like tissue paper thin. I'm just saying if you touch the leaf and if you rub your fingers together, if it feels like it's going to rip or it could rip, it's probably a terrarium plant. Usually the plants with the thicker leaves are not terrarium plants. I have found that plants with thicker leaves are almost more hardy. So, ergo, they don't need a terrarium. Again, as an example, blanchii has thick leaves, succulent-like leaves, and it does not need a terrarium. My species Sumatera, my silver coin begonia I posted a few weeks ago, that has very thick leaves also, and I'm almost certain it doesn't need a terrarium either. I just haven't gotten around to actually testing that theory out. And there's one more that just popped into my head. Yenyenii. Well, that one actually says in the research paper that it doesn't need a terrarium. So there you go. But again, if you feel the leaves of the plant, you can tell why it's very thick. So anyway, I digress, off topic, but that's helpful information. Okay, back to what I like about plants. Oh, I like obviously experimenting with them. That actually might be my favorite over propagate. I don't know. They're both so good. They're up at the top. Yeah. obviously the experiments on my account are what I personally enjoy the most doing on my account. And I get a lot of people also agreeing with that. They kind of like that I do these experiments. And I think it's one, helpful because everybody's environment is different. Every single person's house or growing conditions, growing environment is different. So what could work for me might not work for you. So doing experiments in your own environment is very helpful. And I encourage people to not just look at the experiments that I've done and take it, for, I don't know, what's the saying? Don't take it as fact. Like, you should do maybe a similar experiment in your own environment and see if the results are consistent. And if they're off a little bit, then you can keep that in mind for the next experiment I do. You can maybe offset it a little bit because you've already tested out one of my experiments in your own living environment. So I always suggest people to do experiments in your own living environment, but I find them to be incredibly helpful in obviously getting to know your own plant, getting to know your own living environment, getting to see what works for you. And then you can alter your care based on the experiments that you're doing. So like if you live, I'm giving an example here. If you live in Arizona or in some kind of desert climate, you are going to have a different outcome than where I live, which is in southern Florida. Let's just take the obvious one would be humidity. Obviously, in southern Florida, it is way more humid than it is in Arizona. And even if you're living in a house or an apartment complex or wherever else that people live, even if, let's say, we have the same indoor temperature, like the humidity is going to be a huge contributing factor if you're not using closed systems, if you're not using closed containers. So if you duplicate my experiment in your house in Arizona, it's going to be different just because the environment outside is different. And, if you live in Iceland versus Jamaica, those plant experiments are going to be different, even if you're doing it in an indoor environment. So anyway, I don't want to get redundant. I think I'm just talking about the same thing here, but you guys understand what I'm saying. I know you understand what I'm saying. I'm just talking in circles here, but yeah, so those are why I love doing experiments, and I think they're fun. They're just fun in general. I like testing out new products, new like fun trinkets. Like I just bought, which I'm posting about soon, I bought a water distiller from Begonia Express. She recommended it to me. Well, actually, she asked if I had one, and I said, no, I didn't even know like those existed. So then she sent me the link to the one that she got, so I ordered it because, less plastic, blah, blah, blah. You don't have to buy distilled water from the grocery store anymore. So I got that little trinket, and it is so cool. So I'm doing an experiment with that, but yeah, so I love testing out new products. I like testing out, new care products and, like a water distiller and, things like that. It's very interesting to me. And it keeps my account, I think, fresh, and it keeps my interest in the account. Like I've had my account open since May of 2021. So it's been 2 years. And I haven't yet felt bored or run down or just maybe stressed out isn't the right word, but like I haven't felt like, oh, I'm out of ideas and I'm scrambling trying to get, post ideas. Like the fact that I focus so much on my experiments, like it keeps that interest alive in me and it keeps me wanting to make posts. So, and spreading information. That's essentially what it comes down to, and helping people and, get information out there and things like that. So, that might be, I might like my experiments more than propagating, but we can say that they're tied. And then probably lastly, I guess it kind of ties into experiments, but I love, okay, this might be a three-way tie. I love making my potting mix. There is something about getting my little ingredients from my cereal dispenser, putting it in a little tub or a little mixing dish, and like scooping it all together. Just the incorporation of it all. I love seeing it mixed together. I like seeing the color changes. I like seeing the granules of the akadama like swirl around. I don't know. This makes me sound kind of weird, but we're all plant people here, right? Like everybody has their things that they really like about plant care. But yeah, there's just something about making my potting mix that I absolutely love. And tying into the experiment thing, probably my favorite types of experiments to do are testing out new substrate mixes or substrate additives. So like when I tried, well, I almost mentioned one that I haven't posted yet. Sorry. Like when I tried, when I just tried my charcoal, or when I tried growing my Begonia Sarawak in pure worm castings, and when I tested like the pH of all my different little soil additives, like that to me is fascinating. And I don't know if that ties into the fact that I was an ICU nurse, so I like kind of the more, I don't want to say technical, but kind of like the technical part of it, like the pHs and the like the soil, like the different sizes of the soil particles and how they all incorporate together. Like there's something about that makes my brain go purple with happiness. I just love that. And I love testing out new soil additives, soil amendments, new soil mixes, etc. So, okay, I've talked a lot about what I like about plant care. I'll talk about what I don't like. I don't like, let's see if I can think of the number one thing I don't like. Oh, easy. The number one thing I don't like is when I have to transfer my sprouts to soil. And I'm sure everybody who's listening to this knows that I sow my begonia seeds on akadama, which is an inorganic material. And when they germinate and they grow, a little bit, a few weeks, they eventually are going to need soil or organic material to continue growing healthily. I don't know if that's a word. Keep growing healthy. You know what I'm trying to say. Okay, so they need organic matter. So I have to take my pinpoint tweezers and physically, and begonia pods have like hundreds of seeds in them. It's actually ludicrous the amount of seeds that come out of these tiny little pods. And I have to sit there with my little pinpoint tweezers and individually take each little sprout, put it in another container with soil. And it takes hours, no joke, it takes hours. At least I would say, I think I timed myself once. It took me 3.5 hours to do one container. And I only took potty breaks. So it was basically straight 3.5 hours of me transferring these little sprouts. So because it takes so long and it's so redundant. You're literally doing the same motion for 3.5 hours. Sometimes, it's a bad habit of mine, I'm working on it. I sometimes put it off for too long because I just don't want to do it because it takes so long. But I've come up with a new system. Actually, just this last time I was transferring, this happened, I don't know, maybe like last week or so. I thought, okay, I really don't want to do this anymore and I have to make it more enjoyable because it started to become like I was thinking about it like a job, and I was getting very unhappy thinking about, oh my God, I have to do this. So I was like, okay, let me get creative here. So I came up with 2 solutions and I'm testing them out. They're going to be for future posts. But I obviously don't want to mention it here and, recommend it because I don't know if it's going to work or not. But those posts will be coming up. Well, it'll probably take a few months, but it's coming in the future. I'm testing out 3 different new techniques on how to avoid doing that. Yeah, that is probably by far number 1 and number 2. I would dare to say it's number 2 also. Like it is, yeah, I just don't like it. Okay, and again, just like the other ones, it's in no particular order. But I also don't really care for pollinating. That might sound odd because it only takes 3 seconds to pollinate flowers, but I don't know, there's just something about taking the plant out of its little home, putting it on my desk or my table, and then, washing my hands and getting all the organization tools ready, where I write the date and what the plant is and getting it all waterproofed and all that. Washing my hands, coming out, cutting the flower off, rubbing them together, sterilizing my scissors, putting the label on. There's just something about that whole thing that is just not my favorite. I wouldn't say like I dislike it or I hate it. Like I don't really hate anything except for the seed sprouting. I really don't like that, but the seed transferring thing. But it's just not my favorite thing to do. And I have also noticed that I've been kind of putting that off too. Like if I see a female is ready, I'm like, oh, I guess I'll just do it later or tomorrow. And sometimes I'll just wait until the next day because I just don't want to go through like the whole process of doing that whole thing there. So anyway, that's that. Oh yeah, okay. Oddly enough, I love watering my plants, but I don't like checking my plants if they need water. It sounds kind of weird saying it out loud, but if I was really thinking about it, I don't like checking if my plants need water. I just like watering them. Sounds so silly, but yeah, I don't like checking plants for water. I don't know. It's just, I'd rather just give everybody water. And that's probably how I wind up overwatering some of my plants sometimes. Okay, what else? Oh, the condensation inside my bins. I do not like wiping the sides of my bins down. And I posted about this a few weeks ago, and I got loads of messages and comments about suggestions for what other people do. So if you were one of those people, thank you. I appreciate it. I have ordered some stuff. I've ordered some kind of, what was it? I don't know. I don't want to call it like a Rain-X spray, but it was basically like a car spray that is hydrophobic, so the water beads like don't stick to the sides. I ordered it. I don't know if I'm going to use that. One, because the water is still inside the bin and it has to go somewhere. So where is it going to go if it's not on the sides, but on the bottom? And I don't want to have a little lake of water in the bottom of my bins because I don't want the pots to soak up the lake at the bottom. So there's that. And then number 2, I feel like that's maybe it's like a harsh chemical spray, and I don't know about the fumes in there. like, I don't know, maybe like it gives off chemicals or something, and it's in a closed container. So it's not like the plants are getting any air in there. So I'm a little hesitant. I ordered it, but I can always return it if I don't use it. And then the other thing that was, I'm just giving the two main ones that were suggested. The other one was, it was like a film, a condensation like film that you can put on the sides of the bins. But that would also give the same effect as the Rain-X spray, because the water has to go somewhere and it would only go to the bottom of the bin. So I don't know. I'd have to test that out. Oh, I just remembered another thing. Somebody mentioned putting oil, like a small amount of oil, on the sides of the bins, obviously creating a hydrophobic environment. I haven't tried that yet, but it just popped into my head. I'm actually going to try that first because it's the most, natural thing, I would say. Okay, talking about it out loud made me remember that. So I'm actually going to try that first before I try those other things. But yeah, getting rid of the condensation in my bins is a very tedious, annoying task because I have 8 big bins and I don't like doing it. Okay, what else? Oh, kind of just more like, I would say overall, I'm a very patient person, but when I order a new plant, I want it there the next day. So when you have to wait for plants after you order them, and then there's always, a little bit of anxiety, and if they're going to arrive okay, if the postman is going to be courteous to the box, and all those kinds of things. I don't like that that's just plants in general. Like, I don't like the anticipation, I'll say. I don't like the anticipation of getting new plants and, experiencing a little anxiety before the plant gets there. And also, a lot of the times I've ordered plants and then I don't like them in person. And that's happened more than a few times. So there's always a little bit of that in my mind before I buy a plant, where I'm like, okay, am I going to like this in person? And then truthfully, the answer is you don't know until you see it in person. So, more than a handful of times I've been disappointed opening a box, seeing the plant in person. So there's a little bit of that, which I don't like. What else? Oh, kind of going along with that, when you get new plants and you have to quarantine them in, their own little box, terrarium bin, for, pest reasons and things like that, because I just want everybody to be a big happy family. So it's a little annoying that I have to separate a separate box for new plants, but that's just more like of a space issue, I would think. But in general, I don't care for the quarantine process. And what is the last thing? Oh, yeah, this is just about plants in general, but in general, it's not my preference when plants are mixed with politics. It's a pet peeve of mine. I don't like that aspect of the plant Instagram accounts. Some of them, obviously, not all of them, but yeah, I just don't personally like the mix of politics and plants. I think plant accounts should stay plant accounts, and because if you think about it, there's really nothing political about a plant, except plant topics maybe. So yeah, that's just in general. I don't like, that would probably be in general about the plant community as a whole. I don't care for the mixture of politics and plants. What else? I think that's pretty much it. I think we covered a wide variety of topics here. I hope this was interesting. You guys can comment on my Instagram. I don't know if there's comments on this. If there is, you can comment somewhere if this is interesting or not. And I hope it is. I hope it was somewhat entertaining. And I'm really having fun recording these, so I hope you all are listening and enjoying it also. And I will stop here, and I made it to the 30-minute mark, which is double the time of my first one. Oh, I should mention, if you haven't seen my first episode, you can watch that. It's called About Me, I think. It's just episode 1. It's like 15 minutes just about me, my background, and how I got into plants, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode 2. I look forward to recording the next one, and thank you again for listening. Bye.